Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. How y'all doing? Hope you've had something healthy to eat. We've got quite a story to show. This one is Jordan Peterson, who's one of the favorites on this channel. He does not like Trudeau, he does like Poilievre, and so many comments and commentary on things in Canada. He is a Canadian political figure, not into politics, but he is involved somehow. Let's take a good, deep, hard look at Jordan Peterson, see what this guy's all about. He's very entertaining. You'll see.
I think our leader, Trudeau, I don't think I've ever heard him say a true word.
When you look at Canada at the moment, what are our problems?
Well, the central underlying illness is a monstrous growth in the power and cost of the state at the expense of the agency and freedom of the people. I'm here simply restoring what already belonged to Canadians by virtue of their 800-year inheritance of English liberties going back to the Magna Carta. I'm just among the common people who are custodians of that freedom while we're alive. You know, Edmund Burke said it's a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. And we're the living generation has the duty to pass on that inheritance. And that's what I see myself doing, is to rekindle that inheritance and pass it on to my kids, and so they can pass it on to their kids. And I'll pass away into the fade away into the past one day, but hopefully we'll have secured the freedom that we inherited for many more generations to come. And that's what I mean when I want to give people back control of their life in the present. It's also to extend it into the future.
Sorry, the family thing is there's some
Speaks
aspect
to his
of
character.
his character. There is some aspect to him that makes him a good man.
Well,
in that sense,
I mean, there's the evidence there, you know. I mean, he's not a Jeffrey Epstein profligate on the sexual front, so that's something. And his wife, they seem to have a real marriage. And well, it's a funny kind of disappointment, because I'm disappointed more as a citizen of Canada, I would say, than on the personal side of things. And, you know, people might find that difficult to believe, but I'm in a fortunate position. In some ways, even if the college throws everything it can at me, there's very little they can fundamentally do to disrupt my life. I'm in a privileged position compared to most professionals.
So we decided to have this conversation because of what's going on with you in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
And that your clinical psychology license is in jeopardy because you have opinions about politics that they disagree with, which is a very dangerous and bizarre turn of events.
Well, it's your fault, actually. You know, I told you, I think a week or so ago when we talked about this. Okay, so let me give you some background here. So
I want to know how it's my fault.
I will. I'll tell you. A lot of things are your fault, as it turns out.
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah. So the College of Psychologists has basically levied what are equivalent to about 13 lawsuits against me simultaneously. Now, the reason I call them lawsuits is because they're actions undertaken on behalf of a complainant. Now, the complainant can be anyone anywhere in the world who complains about me for any reason. They don't have to be former clients. They don't even have to be anybody I've ever met. They don't even have to have met anybody I've ever met. So, you know.
So it could be someone online.
Well, it is. All this is pretty much, all these complaints are someone online. None of them are my clients, although half of them claim to be falsely. And the college didn't throw out their complaints despite that. So, which is really quite interesting.
And what are the complaints?
Well, okay, let's see. The one complaint is about the tweet I made about Eleanor Elliott Page, and when I said that a criminal physician cut off her breasts and that pride was the sin. So now I'm in trouble again because I just said the same thing. One was about Sports Illustrated cover where they featured that overweight model, and I tweeted out "not beautiful," and I guess that was something like fat shaming. I don't remember exactly what the charge was. And then I criticized Justin Trudeau and a former staff member of Justin Trudeau and Jacinda Ardern. I made a joke about her. I was going to New Zealand, and the New Zealand leftist press was freaking out, and I made this joke about bringing my alt-right trolls to New Zealand, and And then I put in parentheses, or maybe they're just, ordinary people who are trying to clean up their rooms. So apparently that was casting the profession into disgrace. And then they submitted, one complainant from the U.S. submitted the entire transcript of our last discussion. So, I don't know how to defend myself against that, because apparently everything I say, and apparently everything you say too, is bringing the profession of psychology into disgrace. And I think they're most upset in that case about my comments about the inadequacy of climate models. And so, what that has to do with my clinical practice is questionable, to say the least. And so, anyways, does that cover it?
Yeah, it seems like this climate thing is a very rigid ideology that one must subscribe to wholesale.
Yeah.
You can't have any nuanced opinions on it, and you can't have any.
Well,
There's
it's a
no
religion.
variation.
It's a religion.
Yeah.
It's a partial pseudo religion, and I mean that technically. I'm going to write about this to some degree, and I'm writing a new book which will come out in November called We Who Wrestle with God, and I'll cover that in this. But Alex Epstein, who wrote Fossil Fuel Future recently, comments about this a bit. So the basic structure of the quasi-religious belief, and so this is the set of initial presumptions. That's a way of thinking about it. We were talking about how ideas are structured earlier. The Marxists believe that everything's about power. There's a narrative at the base of any belief system, and the climate pseudo-religion is based on characterization of nature as something like a hapless, what would you call hapless, defenseless, fragile virgin. The industrial activity of mankind is characterized as something like a rapacious, power-mad, demolisher of natural virginity and beauty. And then the human being the individual is characterized as nothing but a devouring mouth whose activity runs contrary to the untrammeled beauty of the planet, and that supports the activity of the tyrannical patriarchy. That's basically it. And so the reason that narrative has force is because it draws on underlying religious archetypes. And so to characterize the world properly, you do need to characterize the positive aspect of nature, because you have to live in something approximating a reciprocal harmony with nature. Because if you just eat everything and devour everything in your local landscape, well, then you die. So that's a bad idea. So you have to have some sense of the value of nature. Now, you also have to have some sense of the fact that if you were dropped in the jungle naked in the Amazon, you'd be dead in about 48 hours. So you also need a figure to characterize the negative element of nature, and that's completely absent from the environmental myth. That's part of what makes it pathological. And then with regard to the rapacious tyranny, let's say, well, any industrial system or any human organization can exploit the natural world to the point where that's not sustainable, and it can become oppressive and tyrannical. That's the evil king, ancient part of religious mythology going back as far back as we can chase it. So you need a representation of the negative aspect of society, because you send your kids to school and they kind of get turned into these cookie cutter kids, and that crushes their innate, difference and beauty, and it's all the pain of having to be socialized. And you have to understand that there is this oppressive element of culture. And so, but then, you should also wake up and notice that you've got the wise king too, and that means you plug in your damn toaster in the morning and the electricity works, and you go out on the street and everyone isn't rioting, and there's workmen who are knee deep in the sludge trying to keep everything going, and you're not starving to death like everybody on the planet was in 1860. And so a little gratitude for the positive end of the patriarchy is in order too, and that's completely absent in the environmental view. And then with regard to the individual, it's like, well, of course you can be a selfish, impulsive, hedonistic consumer, and you can facilitate the rapacious tyranny as a consequence of that, rape the planet. But by the same token, we're not a cancer on the face of the earth. We're not a virus that's mutating and taking out the planet, and we're not trapped in a Malthusian nightmare. And you got to give credit where it's due. And, there's an element of people, of everyone, that's noble and generous and kind and productive and capable of living in a well-ordered state in something like sustainable and productive harmony with nature. You only get half that story. Now, if you have no comprehensive underlying cultural narrative, which is increasingly the case in our society, and someone offers you, when you're a teenager, half the religious story, that'll just snap you up in a second, because it helps you order your relationship with the world. It gives you a pathway too, eh? So Jean Piaget, the great developmental psychologist, he called the last stage of adolescence the messianic period, the messianic stage. Now, most people don't talk much about that, I think, because they don't know what to make of Piaget's claim, but he was a real genius, Jean Piaget. Where people are attempting to make us speak their language.
He is no stranger to speaking his mind.
What the judiciary is doing in support of the college is wrong, as we all know.
An Ontario court says the province's College of Psychologists had the authority to tell Peterson to take social media training or face possible disciplinary action.
So it's actually an indefinite sentence, conditional only on what? On what? On what? My compliance? By what standard? To cap it all off, a social media communication expert. Who the hell is that?
It followed complaints about some of Peterson's online posts, like one about actor Elliot Page. Peterson said the doctor who removed Page's breasts was a criminal. Another was directed toward a former Ottawa city councillor who uses they-them pronouns, describing Catherine McKinney as, quote, an appalling, self-righteous, moralizing thing.
Inciting any type of hatred that could lead to, a risk to someone's well-being does start to cross that line.
The court wrote Peterson cannot have it both ways. He cannot speak as a member of a regulated profession without taking responsibility for the risk of harm that flows from him speaking in that trusted capacity.
Don't bloody well lecture me, some dimwit judge with a liberal bias, lecturing me about taking responsibility for what I say.
Peterson says both it and the college overreached. This law professor disagrees.
When it comes to licensing bodies of certain regulated professions, there are limits that are imposed that are part of upholding the integrity and the professionalism that comes with being a lawyer or being a psychologist.
The decision will no doubt only add fuel to the fire worldwide between Peterson's supporters and detractors.
Powerful in the system. And so when this big beast called government gets bigger and more powerful, those who have the ability to steer that beast are the ones who are going to profit from it.
So what do you think of the success of countries like the Scandinavian countries, let's say, well, and the relative success of Canada? Because there's been a fair, solid socialist influence, more the English socialist type than the communist-derived type, fair socialist influence in Canada, and it's formed some of our fundamental institutions, our healthcare system, our pension system, a fair bit of labor legislation. I mean, when you look at, and then, of course, the Scandinavian countries, small though they are and homogenous though they are, they're quite radically successful in function. So what do you make of that? And how do you balance that against your emphasis on, well, a more conservative philosophy and your support of the freest markets possible in some sense?
All right, so let's start with the Scandinavians. I mean, there's some really uncomfortable facts about the Scandinavian countries that the left would not like to talk about. Like Norway, 25% of Norway's economy is oil. So that's really tough to grapple with if you're a modern socialist.
Let's say since Confederation, we won't go back any farther than that, was 1867, 150 years. Our institutions were reliable, derived as they were from Great Britain, which produced reliable institutions for all sorts of miraculous reasons. You could trust the political parties. The Socialists were a Labour Party. The Conservatives were a party of big business. The Liberals kind of played both ends against the middle and were centrists, and they were usually in power. And all things considered, that didn't work out too badly. When we got tired of them, we could elect the Conservatives, which happened now and then federally, or the Socialists or the Conservatives, which happened fairly regularly provincially, and the whole damn country functioned well. The education system worked. The higher education systems were, we don't have Harvard or Stanford, but all our universities were pretty damn good. No duds in the lot, really. Canada was a very stable, middle-class country with reliable institutions. And
I'd like to commend all of you for your diligence and work on accomplishing what you have under trying conditions and also for keeping your heads in a way that's been a model for the entire world, close quote. Now the clip.
It has to stop. The people of Ottawa don't deserve to be harassed in their own neighborhoods. They don't deserve to be confronted with the inherent violence of a swastika flying on a street corner, or a Confederate flag, or the insults and jeers just because they're wearing a mask. That's not who Canadians are.
All right, so
Wow. I can hardly even look at him.
Here's the first question. How can discourse in a great democracy have become so polarized that Jordan Peterson and the Prime Minister look at exactly the same set of events and come to opposite conclusions about them?
Well, he's lying, and I'm not. So that's a big part of the issue. I don't believe that he ever says a word that's true. On behalf of Canadian law, a declaration of the fact that we enjoy freedom of speech, followed immediately by the proclamation that that can be limited in any way, essentially, that the colleges and the professional organizations see fit. And if that's the case, given that that's also a branch of the government, that combined with the fact that I am absolutely 100% being pursued for political reasons, as I can document detail and have, I don't think that our constitutional guarantee of free speech in Canada, I don't think it exists. What we're doing in Canada on the energy front is utterly insane. It's utterly insane. And why do I say that? Well, I say that not least because I saw what happened to Germany. If the Greens would have managed to increase the price of electricity, but maintain its reliability and cut the pollution associated with its production, that would be one thing. But what they did instead was make it so expensive that even electric battery manufacturers can no longer afford to operate in Germany. They made it utterly unreliable. They killed off their nuclear industry, which was, to call that insane is to barely scrape the surface. They made it much more expensive, and it's way more polluting than it used to be because now they rely on burning lignite. So how in the world, unless you're aiming at disruption, which I do believe is what the psychopaths on the green side are aiming at, by the way, unless you're aiming at disruption and impoverishment and mass misery, every single bit of that reeks of failure by the criteria of the people who put the policies in place.
There's a bit about Jordan Peterson. You know more now than you did before you started watching the video. I bet you do. And it is fun. So come and join us while we watch one of our live daily broadcasts. We cover all the question periods. It's super fun. We've got a great community of like-minded people that are just watching Canadian politics, learning, seeing what's going on, getting caught up, and maybe ahead of these guys. My name's Aaron. This is Question Period Canada. Like and subscribe. We have a blast here all the time. Come check us out more often. We have a great time here. That's it. Thank you. We'll catch you next video.